think we're living an unprecedented time in Africa. Africa has now this year completed 20 years of rapid growth, which, the last time that had happened was before the mid-70s. That growth is based on investment, and it is contributing to poverty reduction and to enormous growth in the cities and other sectors in Africa. I think the main things to keep that growth going are, I'd call it a two-part strategy. Mind the basics and make growth more inclusive. So minding the basics is about not forgetting macroeconomic discipline, which is really important and was a big part of Africa's success in the last 20 years. But now we begin to see a few countries running budget deficits which are a bit large, borrowing in the Eurobond market at high rates. And these things can threaten the stability and sustainability of the growth path for some of these countries. At the moment, that's still a small group, but we should keep an eye on it. The other part of the basics is to continue to invest. There's a huge infrastructure gap in Africa, in energy, transport, telecommunications, and there's also need to invest not only in physical, but in human capital. There's been a lot of progress with enrollment rates, but the quality of what's being taught at schools can still improve a lot. So on the basics, macro stability, investment. On making growth more inclusive, it's really about taking Africa's growth to the places and sectors where the poor are. Sometimes growth is based on small enclaves, natural resource sectors that don't employ that many people, whilst the majority of the population is still dirt poor in the countryside. And it's about how to include those people that I think is the strategy going forward. The human capital is front and center for the bank. For African economies to become more competitive than they are today, they need more skilled labor forces, and those skills are particularly scarce in the areas that we call STEM: science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So we do have a strong program of supporting centers of excellence across the continent in a number of universities, I believe about 11 universities or so. Focusing in particular on these four areas: science, technology, maths, engineering. Those skills are needed for the entrepreneurs, engineers, and industry leaders in the continent in the future. Having said that, I just want to say that whilst human capital is fundamental, the bank is also very heavily involved on the physical capital side, particularly on energy and transport infrastructure. The energy gaps in Africa are enormous. I just came back from Zambia, where the rural electrification rate is about 3%. So 97 of each 100 Zambians who live in the countryside, that's excluding the cities, do not have access to electricity. It's very hard to develop when your children can't read at night and when people don't have a fridge or basic things like that. So we are also investing very heavily on that physical capital side. You're right that the appearance of new forms of conflict in the Sahel are very worrying, and not only in the Sahel, also in the north of Nigeria with Boko Haram, and in Kenya and other parts of East Africa arising from Al-Shabaab in Somalia. But you're right that there are substantial threats in the Sahel, and those became most evident to everyone in the international community with the civil war in Mali. And there, I think we see something that's a pattern in the Sahel, which is legitimate ethnic grievances and issues like those that existed between the Tuareg in northern Mali and the government of Mali in the south, which had long been a subject of negotiation and occasional strife. But the new dynamics is when those are captured by extremists either religious extremists or other forms of extremists, often supported from abroad or with armaments obtained, say in this case in Libya. And so those introduce a whole new dynamics to those conflicts and make them much more lethal and much more problematic for the state. As we saw in that case, they actually conquered territory and became a real threat to the Malian state in general. I'm not sure I would agree that we're about to see permanent conflict from Mali to Sudan. That may be a little too pessimistic, but it definitely means that it's definitely a volatile situation in the Sahel, which one must monitor carefully. And it can only work, any intervention there can only work through genuine representatives of the populations of those countries, right? It cannot be seen as an outside intervention by the West. That would play into the hands of the extremists. So it needs to be done carefully, cautiously, thoughtfully, with the support of the local populations.